Hello, my name is Troy Haynes. I'm the founder of Sky High and Fly Jump Camps. Welcome to my Raise the Bar podcast, where we will be discussing all aspects of jumping, including training, coaching, technique, injury rehab and prevention, plyometrics, strength and conditioning, speed, agility, flexibility, and nutrition, and anything else of interest along the way. My very first guest on Raise the Bar will be Aaron Wascha. This is a young man that I came across on my Instagram feed who was performing a moving 6-foot box jump, a 72-inch box jump off of 2 feet. All right.
What's up, Troy?
Not much, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to sit down and chat with you about this stuff.
Hey, this is awesome. I've been wanting to do a podcast for a long time, and I really don't even have a clue to what I'm doing. So I'm glad I got a experienced warrior like yourself on there. How many of these have you done?
Well, I was going to say I actually haven't done any. I've only done like maybe one snippet, but I don't have much experience in podcasts.
Okay.
A lot of Zoom calls, but not necessarily a podcast.
Okay. Yeah. One of my athletes actually got me, a tech guy that was like, yeah, you can do it off a Zoom call, and I'll do this and that. Just go ahead and do one, and I'll figure it all out for you later. So I'm like, all right, well,
sweet.
Yeah.
Right? I've definitely thought about it though, because it's nice to be able to have a whole conversation about it. Because things come up in conversation that don't come up when you're just talking to a screen yourself. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, I hear that.
That's the beautiful part about it, for sure.
Everything's just exploding right now too. This whole, during the pandemic, it's kind of forced, us to become different people. Like I sat around for 3 months, just crying and complaining that I couldn't train any athletes. And, I literally had nowhere to go. Like I couldn't go to a gym. I couldn't go to a track. I couldn't do anything. So we were going to like local parks and taking cones with us and doing drills, and, the few dedicated, athletes that I had. And then I, once school let out, I was even worse. I'm sitting around the whole summer with nothing to do, and just
right.
Like, what can I do to redeem this time? And I toyed with the idea last summer, and I downloaded a podcast thing by myself, and I'm trying it out, and I could, I'm a dinosaur with this stuff. It's like, I'm one of those old guys that can't get anything to work. I'm like, my mom, she can't even figure out her phone still. And I'm like, God, I'm not really that far removed from my mom. I can't figure this stuff out. So,
hey, either way, you made it happen, found a way to learn it.
You know what? God is good that way, man. It just seems like things just keep coming up, and it was just, I keep talking about what I want to do. And then eventually somebody will hear that and go, I got to help this guy out, 'cause I don't want to hear him anymore, complaining about not getting it going, so.
Yeah. Speaking it into existence. That's right? What I say. If you don't put it out there, nobody's going to help you,
Well, hey, I want to make sure that we do our shameless plugs, for our businesses. So I figured I'd start with you, because I came into, for those of you out there listening to this podcast, which I'm hoping there'll be more than one. I'm talking with Aaron. How do you pronounce your last name?
Wascha.
Okay.
Yep.
I saw your site the first time, the wax on, wax off, and I was like, oh, that's Karate Kid,
Right.
And the first notice that I had of Aaron on his Instagram site was it popped up on my feed. I can't remember why. It was probably one of the hashtags, right? And it was a standing. Well, you were moving into it, but it was a real aggressive running 2-footed 6-foot box jump, which I've been watching a lot of guys jump. I'm a jump coach and trainer, and I'm constantly watching these, young kids do this stuff. And I was just like, wow, 6 feet, that's just, phew. And you're only what, 6? Are you even 6 feet yourself?
Yeah, I'm about 6'2".
6'2". So
yeah,
that's just unreal. And that led, we actually got a little dialogue going. I think I messaged you and asked you a couple questions, and Aaron was gracious enough to reply and start talking about training and some really interesting stuff that he was working on. So that's kind of how I met him. We can go into more detail on that. First of all, Aaron, I saw the number call was from Michigan. So why don't you tell everybody where you're from?
Yeah, so born and raised in Michigan. I actually and I'm 20. I just turned 29 yesterday. Actually, yesterday was my birthday. So yeah,
Wow.
and
Happy
about
birthday.
I appreciate that, man.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then about 3 months ago, my girlfriend and I moved out to Colorado Springs. So
Okay.
we love it out here. Colorado Springs is awesome, and it's if you know anything about Michigan, it's Colorado is especially better for training.
Sure.
The weather's a little nicer, and I'm able to be outside a lot more, hit the field,
Right.
all that good stuff. So that's where I'm from.
Okay. So from Michigan. So does that make you like Michigan, Michigan State? Where do you stand on the whole rivalry and all that?
Oh yeah, I'm a Spartan. I went to
Okay.
Michigan State, so got to
Mag-
roll with my Spartans.
Magic Johnson. Geez, when I was a kid, watched Magic got drafted right after he beat Bird, got drafted by the Lakers and took the Lakers to a championship. It's like bing, bing. And
Oh
nobody
yeah.
even knew who he was before the NCAA tournament that year. It's like, who's this 6'9" point guard? Like, this is crazy. And yeah, crazy stuff. So Michigan State, what do you think about, I'm sure you're just loving having Harbaugh there at
At
Michigan.
Michigan. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm surprised he's still around, honestly. But
Right?
yeah. Hey, I can't say too much though. The Spartans have had a down past couple of years
Yeah.
as well. But yeah, I love the rivalry. So I'm glad he's there because your Michigan
Right.
fans, they love Harbaugh. So
Oh
it's
gosh.
always a
Yeah.
sweeter win.
I tell you what. So you're from Michigan, then you went to high school and college in Michigan also? Where'd you go?
Yeah, went to high school, went to Michigan State, was probably about an hour away from my hometown. So
Okay.
went to Michigan State for kinesiology, which is exercise science, for those of you who aren't familiar. Um,
Yes.
and yeah, kind of took that route. Wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do in college. Thought about the physical therapy route. Um, and then I ended up taking a strength and conditioning class, and that's kind of what turned me on to the whole sports performance side of things
Okay.
because I was always an athlete, and then when I think he was like a graduate assistant who was teaching this class within Michigan State, and he just kind of opened my eyes up to how much potential I was leaving on the table because of my mobility. Like I was so inflexible at the time,
Right.
my mobility. And then just basic, not basic concepts, but he turned me on to some techniques that I still use to this day. So yeah, I'm
Okay.
always forever grateful for him. Yeah,
Now
so that's kind of where it all started. And then yeah,
go ahead.
I'll just say yeah. And then after college, I became a strength conditioning coach at a high school. Did that for 2 years. I was also coaching football, surrounded by football. I coached
Right.
strength trained all the teams, and then went didn't want to. So I didn't play college football at Michigan State. I just went to school there. I was kind of a late bloomer out of high school, so I put on some inches in college, and put on some weight. And yeah, so anyways, after the fact, I decided to go back and play professional football. Let's see, 2 years out of college, and yeah, ended up in the AFL, the Arena Football League, playing for the
Wow.
Philadelphia Soul.
That's an amazing story, Aaron.
Yeah,
So you played high school football? Did you do anything else besides football?
yeah. I was a three-sport athlete in high school: football, basketball, and then I was a long jumper in high school. Uh,
Okay.
long jumper and high jumper in high school, but
Right.
only for my senior year. I joined track and field my senior year. So
Right.
uh,
So football is
yeah,
your first love?
yeah, football was my first love. Basketball was right there with it, but football kind of
Right.
took over basketball after a certain point.
So you played high school football, but you didn't pursue an athletic career in college at all. No, none
I
of that
I
sport?
didn't.
Really?
No, I don't.
Interesting.
I wouldn't say it's a regret because everything turned out all right. But I often wonder why. At least once I kind of hit my growth spurt and put on some weight, like, excuse me, I should have been doing something.
Right.
I
Yeah.
wish I would have tried to walk onto the football team, or at least I had a pretty good year in track and field my senior year, so
Right.
possibly could have pursued that at
What were
Michigan State
your
as well. But
what was the long jump and high jump marks you had that one year, your senior year?
so the highest I had was 6'5" on the high jump,
Okay.
and then 22 feet 4 inches on the long jump.
Nice. Either of those
Yeah,
get you to the state finals?
they did. Yeah, I actually this is one thing. I lost the state finals. So me and the guy, we tied at, I think it was like 22 feet even. That was my last jump. I hit 22. So they didn't let us do like a jump off. They went to our second furthest jump.
Mark. Yeah.
And his was a half inch further than mine.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It ate me up, Troy. Cause I'm a competitor. So like I had a chance to win states. And but
wow. That's amazing. So, all right. So we got you playing high school sports, then you go to Michigan State and you get your degree in kinesiology, which, as Aaron was saying earlier, to those of you out there that may or may not know, I also went to college at UCLA and had the same degree. I got a kinesiology, a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology, which they no longer offer at the school.
Wow.
And then I actually pursued an master's degree in kinesiology at Cal State Long Beach, which was a very good program there. I think they still have it. And most of the time when people hear that, they're like, what's kinesiology? Like, I heard that word, but they don't know what it means. And I'm a lot younger than Aaron. So I was saying, you're at 29 now. I'm actually 29 too. I've been 29 for like 28 years.
All right.
I like that age. Right before you get into the 30s where you're still young enough to feel young and you don't feel like you, so the kinesiology degree was like for trainers. It was either you were going to be an athletic trainer, meaning not a conditioning coach or strength, but like the guys that tape ankles and do that kind of stuff. Which when I was at UCLA, that was a big deal. When I walked into the training room the first time, literally the athletic training room, it was a well-oiled machine. I mean, there was people going all over the place. You get yourself taped up. You had an ice whirlpool. You had this, you had that. And yet you walk in, there's a freshman and this real gruff old guy. I can't remember his name right now. I really should, but he was, one of those barkers that was really had a heart of gold, but he would be like, what do you want? Could I get my shins taped, please? And it's like, go over there, so, but that was kind of an awakening to that, but I really didn't want to do that. I wanted to do, I was a high jumper and I wanted to learn anything and everything that I possibly could to be a better high jumper. And, so that was the thing with me. I loved anything to do with biomechanics. We had a neuromuscular anatomy class, neuromuscular physiology. And this is, again, early 80s. So this is pretty early in the whole deal. Now, I'm sure, as you went through your program in Michigan State, they probably had a lot more options for you to pursue in kinesiology.
Yeah. Like you said, it was going to be like biomechanics or cardiac rehab or physical therapy or occupational therapy. And then there was the strength and conditioning side of things, a specialization in that. And as soon as I took that class, it was a no brainer because obviously I've always been athletic. I've been a leaper, and focusing on my vertical jump was just always, when you're in high school, you play basketball, you want to be able to throw it down and dunk. You just jumping is always like a status thing. People look at it with awe, you know what I mean? Right. And so yeah, that's when I was like, man, I could increase my vertical and just learn to be a better athlete because it's just been a passion of mine. Right. So, but yeah, there was limited options. I would say there's still limited options. It was like a lot of people with kinesiology degrees just end up being your average personal trainer, which there's nothing wrong with that. But,
not that there's anything wrong with it.
There's like not. It's just, you yeah, gotcha. So you could not even go to get a degree and be a personal trainer. So it's like if you going to a D1 Michigan State, there's probably want to do something else with it. But so
I hear you. I didn't do anything with mine, for the longest time. When I got out of college, I started coaching junior college almost right away. And as far as getting a real job, a coaching stipend for $2,500 isn't a real job, but that was the first job that I got, and it was a steady one because they wanted me back every year. But as far as getting a real job, like I'm a high school teacher, I didn't have anything in mind like that. I put all my eggs in I want to be a great athlete and go to the Olympics basket, and that one didn't pan out, of course. So I pursued it till I was 28. We're kind of on these similar life paths. I tried till I was 28. And then I said, well, after the trials in 92, which I didn't even qualify for the trials, I was training to try to make it to the trials. And I finally said, I guess I'm done. I'm 28. I can't jump any higher, than I did when I was a senior in college. So I guess this is time to get a real job and find something to do it. And I didn't find anything in my degree. I had to go and get a teaching credential and do that. So I kind of wish I'd have had a different, the experience and looking back on it and saying, hey, maybe it would have been, but things work out.
They do. They always do.
So I was looking at your site, and it struck me how busy you are. And aside from showing your own personal exploits and jumping and that kind of stuff, I was looking at the list and I saw, your books that you recommend for other people. When they look at you and they're like, wow, I wonder what motivates this guy. So this is the first time I've ever seen this on a site, and I kind of liked it. So I was doing my homework on Aaron, everybody. So I wanted to know what was making Aaron tick. So on his website, on the little, this is on, when I say website, I'm sorry, this is his Instagram, where I started following him. And I had this listed as one of my questions. How many platforms are you on other than Instagram?
Yeah, pretty much just Facebook and Instagram, honestly.
Right.
Okay. I've had a website in the works. It's not quite completed yet. At some point, I would like to, but yeah. And then I would be on 3 with the website. But yeah, Instagram is kind of the hot spot these days. Everybody goes there to find information, and that's like the platform of choice for a lot of people.
Well, I tell you what, it's been amazing for me in that in the last 2 years since I started it, I've gone and just seen so many training things. Like, what I've learned I'm one of those slow lesson learners, but when I get it, I get it. Following the hashtags, following other trainers, following the jumpers, so if a kid shows any interest, I sometimes if I have a spare moment, I'll look through and see who's liked my stuff. Right. And you look through and I see a name, somebody, blah, 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 high jump or something. So I look, and invariably there's a high jump video. So I'll say, hey, you want me to post your video on my site? And so many kids are just like, oh, that'd be great. And get a little bio and show their stuff. And then invariably you'll see coaches come along, or a trainer, or a recruiter. I mean, I was blown away last year after showing this one kid up north who jumped 6'8" up in Santa Rosa. He ended up getting a scholarship somewhere. He called within a couple of days. He said, hey, I got seen by your thing and I got a scholarship to this place. And I was like, how great is that? Just out of nowhere. And then, so I've been following, trainers and coaches, not just in the US, but around the world. And so you're finally getting the curtain. I feel like I'm in the Wizard of Oz. The curtain's getting peeled back. I'm starting to see training from Lithuania, from Russia, from France, and I'm, we're always wondering, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm like, hey, if these guys are kicking our butts, what are they doing that we're not? I'm a high jumper, and, for those of you that don't know, the US record is 7'10" and a half, I believe, by Charles Austin, who won the Olympics a few years back. But we don't own the world record, which we used to. A lot like the high jump, or I'm sorry, the decathlon used to be an American event, man, in the 50s, all the way up through Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn Jenner, but Bruce Jenner in 1976, when I was a 12-year-old kid, I remember watching Bruce Jenner win the Olympics in Montreal. And it had long been an American event. Rayford Johnson, who just passed, UCLA great, he won it in 1960, and his teammate took the silver, CK Yang, at UCLA also. And, just this long tradition. And then since 1976, not so much. We had the Dan and Dave years. That was like one shot, and neither of them won it. And the high jump has left, the US gold. Like I said, Charles Austin got it recently, but as far as the world record goes, there hasn't been anybody holding that from the US. And I've been one of those guys going, okay, wait a minute. If you watch basketball or volleyball and you see these guys jumping out of the building, like, how come we don't have the world record,
I know.
It's pretty amazing. And then I'm watching you do a 6-foot box jump, and I'm thinking, man, we gotta get, this sounds like a crazy idea. Okay. But I want to get together. I guess you can't call it a task force or anything, but just like a group think or a thing, and go, okay, hey, let's find someone kind of like the $1 Million Arm thing, right? That movie that they made about
Yeah.
looking in another country for this kid. Let's find someone who's the perfect body type, the perfect this, but isn't already lost to the world of basketball and everything else. Because let's be honest, you can't make any money high jumping, or you can make a little bit of money playing volleyball. When I was a kid, you could make a lot of money playing beach volleyball. And, you know, I still don't know how well our athletes do when they win every 4 years, because, you know, if you're going to make any money on the Olympics, it's every 4 years, and you better be a gold medal winner, because
Exactly.
we're not going to ask you to make a commercial if you didn't win.
Yeah,
and your
that's
window,
the only way.
It's a tiny window, man. Right after you win, you're the hot ticket. And then if you don't get some kind of a gig, you know, like being on the Wheaties box, like Bruce Jenner, you know, and even then, as great as those guys are, they just disappear because they don't get seen on TV every week like the regular sports. You know?
Right. Besides, like your Usain Bolt, you know, he's a guy who's gonna just always be there, but they're so few and far in between in the track and field. I mean, like, if you asked me to name a handful of names, I probably couldn't. You know, it's like Usain Bolt. Granted, you know, I don't follow it too much, like the sprinting and stuff, but yeah, I hear what you're saying, man. You got to have sponsorships, or it's tough to make money.
It's tough. Oh, well, here we are.
Yeah.
We're both trying to make money, right? So
Yeah.
you're taking the long, hard road there with, so let's talk about that. How's your career going? I saw a couple clips of you playing in the Arena League. I mean, how did that even go after not playing college ball? How did you do that?
Yeah. Well, so, you know, obviously we'll start with my internship. So I get out of college, I go do an internship with a strength conditioning coach at a small college, get into that high school. And, you know, our insecurities drive us a lot. So it's, you know, I was kind of skinnier coming out of high school. I was always, you know, a lean guy, but I'm like, man, I can't let these high school kids see me. You know, I was a relatively young guy. It's my first job at a high school. I'm 22, just getting out of college.
Right.
So I started working out like a fiend, you know what I mean? And that's kind of where it all started, right there at that high school. And then as I continued to I was always very explosive, you know, a jumper, pretty fast. So as I started filling out, one of my mentors, who was also he was my former basketball coach in high school. He's like, man, why don't you give it a try? Like, why don't you at least give it a try and not have any regrets? And I had already been thinking about it. So just kind of a nice little push from him was like, you know what? Life's too short. I don't want to have any regrets. Right. I think I can do this. At the same time, I realized I was behind the ball. I didn't have 4 years of college experience as a receiver. Right. So in short, I just became obsessed with football, running routes, getting better, watching YouTube videos. And then, like, I'd always been, you know, relatively obsessed with the sports performance side. So how to become a better athlete. Right. So when I put those two together, it's when I went to an open tryout for the Philadelphia Soul just on a whim, drove from Michigan to Philadelphia, and I stood out. And I think my athleticism was definitely a big reason that I did stand out. Right. You know, went in, ran a 4.46 in the 40, had a good short shuttle, and just caught every ball. So that's where it all happened, man. It's kind of a long story how that played out too, because I ended up pulling my hamstring my first year in training camp, and I ended up while my hamstring was pulled, they were going to bring me back, and then all of a sudden I got a crazy MRSA infection in my hand. Wow. Like, you know where your calluses are because I was lifting all the time because I wasn't out in the field. Got an infection, had to get surgery, and then I got cut. So long story super short, I had my little montage. I went away. I went back to Michigan. I was, you know, really determined to come back and play. And I was doing 2-a-days for like 3-4 months straight. Came back the next year, and that's really when I had my breakout season, and you know, kind of got myself on the map.
Wow.
So
I tell you, that's my favorite thing is stories like this. Like, you know, I play golf, and every year, you know, one of my favorite tournaments is the U.S. Open, because anybody can go and qualify for the U.S. Open. You can go to your local regional thing and pay your money. And even if you shoot 95 both days, you can put your name down and say, I went to that, you know, and then, so they have certain handicap requirements, but basically if you get low enough, you can go. And then if you shoot well enough, you can be playing on Saturday or Sunday with one of the guys on the tour, and they can tell these stories and go, yeah, this guy was a former basket weaver from Omaha Trade Tech State, and he's out here, looks like he's got about a 9-iron, and it's like the whole thing is this great story of perseverance, and I just want to try this, and the odds are against me, but and there's always a story like that every year. There's somebody that makes it through that's amazing. So the fact that you were able to not play college ball and then go through one year where you had, get a major injury. I mean, a lot of people, might have hung it up there, right? Said,
yeah,
all right, this isn't for me. I tried, I gave it the good old college try, but it seems like everything's stacked against me. But man, you kept going. And so how many years have you played in this league now?
So yeah, it was 2018 was my first year after coming back from 2017. And then 2019 was the last year before COVID. And then obviously because of COVID, only the NFL had a season last year. Now, I did go to some combines over the summer, so I was hoping for something to pan out, whether the NFL or CFL. But like I said, CFL didn't have a season. NFL drastically cut their numbers. They weren't. It wasn't the year for them to take chances on anybody.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's I'm still pursuing it. I mean, I'm 29 now, but my body feels better than ever, and I put a lot of work into that, and it's probably going to be one last push this year. So I actually have a workout coming up May 22nd, fairly soon in Houston.
Okay.
So
now is that
very limited?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just say very limited opportunities this year when it comes to free agents, getting in front of scouts or getting eyes on them. So it's I got to show up and perform on this one.
No pressure. Yeah. So this is obviously the AFL isn't the dream. You want to go and play in the NFL.
Exactly. So, yeah. The AFL was just a means to an end, because not playing college football, what do you have to show? Everybody thinks it's as easy as like going to an open tryout, but the NFL doesn't really have open tryouts. They're very selective. So I had to build up a resume somewhere. So thankfully I was able to get a shot in the AFL and and make a name for myself.
Well, the scouts are out there, right? I mean, I started learning that, after my career at UCLA was over and I started coaching. When I would get to my first year, when I was at Orange Coast College here in Southern California, we went to the state finals, and I have one girl high jumper and another heptathlete that are in the finals, and which I was like blown away. I'm just like, wow, I didn't know that it could work like that. Hadn't really thought that I could get that far with them, and lo and behold, I'm sitting up in the stands, and here come walking up into the stands are some of the UCLA coaches that were my coaches. I'm like, hey, hey, Steve Lang, how you doing? These are my high jump coach. Hey, Bob Larson. Wow, head coach. Wow, what are you guys doing here? Oh, well, yeah, obviously they're there to watch state finals and, try to recruit. So, you're at that level. And then, gosh, in football, you've got, the Arena Football League, and then you've got, those same scouts, like you said, if you're tearing it up north in the Canadian Football League, they're going to see you.
Yeah.
You're over in NFL Europe, or, all the other different, from the defunct leagues that only lasted we had one league a couple of years ago, last like 3 games, another XFL, right? The Vince McMahon thing. So, but I guarantee the scouts are there, right? Because you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry, and turnover is incredible because, human resources, the average life of the NFL player is way less than 5 years. From what I've heard.
Less.
Depends on the position, of course, but
exactly. Yeah, it's tough, man. It's like I said, even in track and field, it might even be more limited positions. Like you get to the elite level, and it's tight. Like you gotta, as like you were going to you were trying to qualify for the trials. It's the best of the best out there. So they're not playing around.
No, it's amazing too, and we're. I think we can get away with this because it's my podcast. So, but the fact of the matter is, the training is amazing too. I mean, back in the day, I know for a fact that steroids were rampant and still are. I mean, everybody can talk ad nauseum about whatever.
Yeah.
And the testing that's here and this and that. But it's like, okay, I just want you to know we're talking about entertainment and mega millions of dollars. And so the temptation is there. And so, people are going to do that. Now, I was accused of doing that. And it's funny because I was like you, I was a 6'3", 180-pound, string bean. In my eyes, I was string bean. I remember when people would say something to me like, you're skinny. I always hated that word because skinny in my mind was skinny equaled weak. And I'm like, okay, I'm 6'3", 180, but I'm benching 240 and I'm, squatting. I think I only squatted like 220 in high school, but I was like, I'm at least doing my own body weight. I played free safety in football and I wasn't particularly fast, but I could jump, and I just realized when I got to UCLA, I walked into the weight room. It was 1982. I graduated in 82, so it was fall of 82. I saw some of the biggest people I have ever seen in my life when I walked into that weight room. Because our high school weight room was nothing. This is the early 80s. We had one universal machine and one squat rack, I remember, and a dip bar. And that was about it in our weight room.
Yeah.
And we started lifting. We did most of our lifting at home. So, the school was no great thing. When I walked into UCLA's weight room, it was like this mecca, 15 power racks and Cybex equipment everywhere. And, 4 complete racks of dumbbells that went from 5 to 150. Right. Wow. And I walked in and there's a linebacker that I knew that was ready for draft. And this guy walks up and picks up 2 150-pound dumbbells like they're nothing and starts doing incline bench like this, just doing reps. Right. And I'm just like looking at him going, and as my legs, the big part of my leg was like his forearm. I was like, oh my God, this is one of the biggest people I've ever seen. So you start to realize quickly, it's like, okay, people just don't get that big, and the training table is real. They're eating 5 plates of food and, that stuff better than I. We should get you talking about it. Let's see, where else do we go along? I wanted to talk with you about that because the interesting thing is you're still having your athletic career and you're giving it your best shot and all those things, which is awesome. I love it. And then you've got this other side of you that is also having already been in strength and, you were the strength conditioning coach right away, right? You said as a 22-year-old.
Yeah.
So I understand that the motivation to work out is probably like, I got to represent, right? You can't
exactly.
be a strength and conditioning coach and be like, so you stepped up a couple levels and you're like, that's right, I'm a strength and conditioning coach. And I'm sure there's a lot of things that you learned along the way there, trial and error and whatnot. What is it? Is that something that you think you would pursue once, to a different degree once your career is over in the NFL?
Yeah, absolutely. That's my business now. I still do online personal training. I prefer to work with the athletes. I'm very a sports performance guy just because that's the harder stuff to learn. Everybody can learn how to do air squats and all that stuff, right. But when you're talking about fine tuning an athlete, that's what I've done to myself. And there's no better feeling than helping a younger guy or younger athlete to not only be injury free, but to just maximize their athleticism. Because everybody's, there's a genetic factor. Let's be real. We both know that. But right. Like you said, it'd be nice to get a guy and just he'd be like a test dummy. Like how much can we improve this guy?
Right.
But yeah, long story short, yes, I definitely want to pursue. I'll continue to have my business, but I think at some point I'm going to really specialize in the sports performance world, whether it's with college, pro, high school. That's what I like to do.
Well, you mentioned Colorado Springs. Is there any impetus there to get involved with the U.S. Olympic Training Center?
Yeah, maybe. That would be a dream come true. You'd be working with the best of the best athletes.
Right.
It's just the credentials. I don't know exactly what credentials they're looking for,
Right.
I'm sure it's pretty strict. Like, I don't know if you need a doctorate or what, but
right.
Either way, I would love to.
That's interesting. Are you now you've got a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology. Have you got any other degrees? You got a master's or any further chasings?
No. So yeah, just the bachelor's in kinesiology, and then right out of college to become the strength coach, I got my CSCS, certified strength conditioning specialist. but I'm going to tell you what, Troy, it's like there's so much to learn outside of just the textbook, which I know you know this, but times are changing, man. And I don't know that the textbooks, I don't know that the textbooks are changing with the times, because the stuff I've learned that I've felt the most difference. I'm a guy who I'm really in tune with my body. I listen to my body. So, that's, as you get to the elite levels, you have to pay attention to the small things, like, what sensations am I feeling? Like we kind of talked about this on the phone last time, but where am I collapsing, not staying lengthened? Where are my muscles not activated? And there's a lot of other resources, and I like to take a little bit from each person and just add a tool to my toolbox, and before you know it, I've just, I didn't even realize I was absorbing that much information until I kind of, when I talk about it or I put it to use on myself, I'm like, man, every person that came into my life or book that came into my life was there for a reason. So it's been cool.
Well, now I'm going to mention one that you brought up with me, and those of you that are out there, Aaron and I'm almost twice as old as he is now. So he's talking about the textbooks. The stuff that I was learning at UCLA was a lot of it was theoretical at the time. The stuff that was quantifiable for me were vectors and angles and stuff like that in biomechanics, and forces applied to force plates and this and that, and fascinating, and all has, I think everybody loves those shows, like the ESPN one where they show, the angle of the ball and when somebody hits it and how far it goes and the forces that are generated and all that. That's the kind of stuff that I really like too. And then there's the other side of it, which is, how do I get muscle to contract faster? How do I get faster? How do I jump higher? How do I get stronger? All these things. And what's the best way to do that? Because, two people could do completely different methods and have different types of results, and yet both of their athletes can improve, right? So from my standpoint, I'm looking at it going, okay, I want to pick the very best possible thing. And it sounds like we've both been in the lab of the human experiment lab with ourselves. You did all that stuff on yourself. When I got to UCLA, I had a couple of great teammates that were, I'll throw out their names because I want to get them on this podcast eventually. Del Davis, who was a 7.725 jumper. He jumped 7.725 my senior year in high school. I read about him in Sports Illustrated, and they mentioned his coach, Bob Larson. Now, they had another guy at the school named Lee Balkin, who ended up jumping 7.6 or 7.7, who still holds the state meet record in California of 7.3 in high school. I think somebody jumped higher overall, but not at the state meet. And then he was at UCLA great. They're 1 and 2 or 1 and 3 on the all-time list, and they were my teammates. When I got there, I was number 7 or 10 on the depth chart. I had to walk onto the team, even though I was a CIF champion in California and went to the state meet. That was like, okay, yeah. So what have you done for us lately? You've only jumped 6'10". We've got like 7 guys that jumped higher than you. So I was like, okay. And when I get there, I meet Bob Larson. He goes, hi, I'm Bob Larson. I'm the high jump coach. He goes, I'm just going to tell you right now, I don't know anything about the high jump. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, Del Davis jumped 7.7. You got Lee Balkin jumping 7.3, and you don't know anything about the high jump. No, I don't know anything about the high jump at all. He goes, you're going to be working with Del and Lee. Well, that turned out to be both good and bad. They were fantastic. They're just like, but they didn't have a coach. So we're just trying all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, we did so much. I remember the workouts where we're jumping up and down the bleachers and, in Drake Stadium. And then we go over to Jan steps. And we're trying to jump 8 steps or 9 steps from a 2, just crazy stuff and high volumes, where I'm surprised I didn't, have shin splints in both legs and patellar tendonitis earlier than I did. And, all these crazy things were just kind of, it was the lab even then, and then they were telling me, hey, you gotta get in the weight room. We gotta do squats. We gotta do, hang cleans and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I get. And I start doing that. And as I'm doing that, I go from 6'3", 180, the skinny kid in high school, to 6'3", 195. I put on 15 pounds, which was great, kind of, but I was heavy now. For a high jumper, 195 pounds is not very light, and Del was 6'3", 6'2", maybe like $150 or $160. And
Oh, wow.
And Lee's like 6'4", 160 maybe. And Lee was like a 46, 47 in the 400 kind of speed. So they were fast and light, and I was never fast, but I was, I could always jump, but I'm like, my strength to weight ratio, when I put on those 15 pounds, kind of went the wrong way. It started going towards
Yeah.
the floor, so I was like, I got to figure out a way. It wasn't until I squatted over 400 pounds that I jumped over 7 feet. So I had to learn the hard way about strength, weight, and power and all that kind of stuff. And if I could reinvent the wheel or go back in time, is a better idea, and say, okay, what could you do better? I'd be like, okay, I need to get stronger without putting on the weight. And that was another thing that caught my eye on your site, because I've been noticing a lot of nutrition stuff that you've been throwing out. So explain to me how that works in, or where you're going with that.
Yeah, so I would say I read a lot of like biohacker books. So basically just how to optimize everything in your life: sleep, energy, down to the cellular level. So I've dove into a lot of books that aren't even on my Instagram. I'm looking at a whole wall of them right here. But
right.
Like I said, that was my obsession for, still is. I just enjoy that stuff.
Right.
But yeah, so I always had achy joints in high school. Like I would get done with a basketball game, track game, I'm icing my knees immediately.
I hear that. Preaching to the choir there, brother.
I know.
Right.
So it's like, I just thought, hey, this is something I'm going to have to deal with. So I'd get in my car, then you get out of your car. When you get home, you're hobbling around.
Right.
So it was like that. It was like that all the way through college. But I still maintained, I was still a leaper. I played a lot of pickup basketball, dunking it, So when I really dialed in the nutrition, I just found that the higher fat diet was better for me when it came to inflammation. So now, I'm 29 and my knees don't hurt. My body doesn't ache. I feel like I have the highest energy levels I've ever had. And I can just really tell that I'm optimized.
Right.
Where back in college, I'm eating fast food, I'm eating McDonald's, I'm eating the college pasta diet.
Right.
Same thing in high school. So once I really dialed that in, then it was just another level to how good my body feels. It's my recovery was faster, I guess I would say.
So how does the high fat go that much? I think most people might hear that and go, wait, aren't you eating a lot of fat? Aren't you just going to get fat? How does that help you with your inflammation response?
Yeah. So obviously you want to do healthy fats. We're not just eating garbage fats. We're talking, when you're cooking with your olive oil, your avocado oil, your coconut oil. So
right.
stable fats. You don't want to use vegetable oil, canola oil. Those are very inflammatory oils because they basically, if you're talking about molecular bonds, their bonds are very weak. So they break apart fast and,
they're unsaturated, right? So unsaturated means lots of single bonds. Okay.
Yeah, you got it. So you don't want to eat those. But then you have other foods like your avocado, your grass-fed meat has healthy fats in there. If you're getting some like raw seeds, nuts, cashews, all that good stuff.
Okay.
So, but basically what happens over time, you've heard of keto, right?
Yes.
So I'm not a full-blown keto guy. I just do what feels good for my body. But when you can transition your body into burning fat as a fuel, you're releasing ketones instead of, carbohydrates just turn to sugar. So you're utilizing glucose. So if you want to look at it as, hey, I have two engines in my body. You have your fat burning engine and you have your sugar burning engine.
Okay.
So when you're just constantly throwing carbs and sugar and energy drinks, like you're staying in that sugar burning mode. So your body wants to run off that fuel.
Right.
So if you can transition it to running off of fat, and when fat gets broken down, it turns into ketones, which is where keto gets its name, from ketones.
Okay.
And ketones are another fuel for our body. And they basically, when they get burned, they're very anti-inflammatory in nature,
really?
by nature.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't realize that.
So, I think I do some things like a lot of athletes think, hey, I have to eat all day long. I just have to pack on weight, eat, where I've just found that wasn't for me because I was inflamed. Every time you eat, your body secretes insulin. And if you have frequent insulin getting secreted, then you're going to have more inflammation because insulin is kind of inflammatory by nature.
Okay.
So Yeah, that was the transition, and it just came from a lot of books. And as an athlete, like I've been able to maintain my muscle mass, and still I only eat 2 meals a day. I intermittent fast, so I don't eat until today. I think I ate breakfast at 1 o'clock, and I ate right before we got on this call. So
Wow.
I don't have to stay strict to my window. Some people are very strict. I'm
Right.
not. But hey,
But,
that's what's worked for me.
but
I haven't
generally 2 times
lost.
a day.
Yeah,
Do you,
I
do
haven't
you get,
lost weight, and
okay. You haven't
yeah,
lost weight. You're maintaining your weight even though you're only eating twice a day.
yeah. I mean, I eat big meals, but
Yeah.
like I said, you used to hear the old, like, I feel like it's a myth. You got to eat 6 meals a day if you want to
Right.
lose weight, whether you're
Right.
losing weight or an athlete. Uh, Now, if you're getting ready for like a big endurance event or something like that, you might have to eat a little bit more carbs.
Sure.
You hear your carb loading, which some of that's been debunked a little bit, but you do need carbs as an athlete. So I'm not saying that. I
Right.
just I limit which ones I get.
Well, you the thing that I found that was fascinating, and I took these classes at Cal State Long Beach, and I had a guy that did we went through the Krebs cycle to a degree that I never thought I would go through, and glycolysis and gluconeogenesis and all, and this guy was really good. It was Dr. Rozenek. He made it fascinating to me. The premise of the class, when he brought it up to us, he said, what's the world record in the 100 meters right now? And this was back in 2005 or four. So I don't know if Bolt had broken it yet, but, I'm sure Carl Lewis had run a 9, 6, 9 or 9, 7, 9 or something. And he said, now, why is it that the human body can't maintain that 9, 7, 9 for the whole 400 meters or even a marathon, and we started going through, and he says, what happens over time? What fuels go in, how are they metabolized? What are the byproducts, and what effects do those have? Right. So we started going through that with a fine tooth comb, and you started realizing, you said, well, your body will burn all of your glucose that's stored in your muscle as muscle glycogen, and then you're done. That's it. So what does your
Mm-hmm.
body do then? If you continue, you're the madman at the top saying we must keep going to your body, and you're talking endurance here, obviously, but even someone on an hour long thing on the treadmill, if they're operating at a
Yeah,
high enough level, right? If they go fast enough for long enough, and they're just working away and sweating like a pig, and heart rate's way up there, and they're done with muscle glycogen, then it's like, what does your body do then? And so you're talking about this is where I'm sure we get lost on the details, but the amount of how hard you're working, how long you're working, what your food was ahead of time, all those kinds of things. And I then, like, when you're talking about with your training your athletes, you've got to take all that into account, right? And train them for
yeah,
their events. Basically, I mean, the high jump that I'm training kids for is a 6-second event at most. 4 or 5 second approach, boom, up in the air, down, right? So
exactly.
it's one of the shortest things you can think of. A lot of track events are like that until you get into the races. Um, Basketball and football are intermittent bursts. Football,
Mm-hmm.
you have a heavy duty burst for 10 seconds or less, and then you get to rest. Basketball keeps going quite a bit unless they call a timeout. Soccer, those guys run around like crazy.
Oh yeah.
So that's so interesting. This opens up tons of stuff for us to talk about. Let's see, how are we doing? I had this list of things I wanted to ask you. You said your girlfriend of the last few years. You guys married? Not married? Working towards that?
No, not yet. Not
Okay.
yet.
um,
We're going on almost 3 years, so it's
okay.
it's moving that way
A good
for
partnership.
sure. Yeah.
Awesome. And then did you guys meet at way back in the day? Is she a high school sweetheart or anything like that, or is this more recent?
No, it's actually more recent. So little did we know, we grew up, our hometowns were, I don't know, probably 20 miles apart, but we ended up meeting after 2018 when I got back from my season. She had went to Concordia in Chicago to play basketball. So she
Okay.
was still living in Chicago, and what do you know? We met over Instagram. Like I was just talking about,
Right.
Instagram's that hot spot. And then
Right.
we just kind of struck up a conversation, and led to led to phone calls, and then it led to us visiting each other. And yeah, and then she still had family back in Michigan, and she'd been wanting to move back, so we were long distance for about a year, and then she moved back to Michigan, and then now we're out here and loving
Awesome.
life. Yeah.
Awesome. That's amazing. Well, listen, I know you're a busy man, and we've been talking we're getting close to an hour. Um, and we can edit this, later on as much as we want, of
Yeah.
course. I'm trying to think. I I get tons of questions that pop into my head. The one last thing I wanted to mention was something that you brought up to me the first time that we talked. My wife was driving the car when Aaron called me, and we were talking about a book that you had read that was talking about the three different types. Was it triphasic? It was triphasic training,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
triphasic
Triphasic
training.
training.
So for those of you out there listening to the podcast, triphasic, if I'm getting it right, mentioned eccentric, concentric, and isometric contractions. Is that right?
Correct. Correct.
And a way to use all of those. Now, what I was taught, and Aaron and I already talked about this when I was at UCLA, they had mentioned to me early that isometrics really had no place in athletic lifting, as I remember. They were just like, no.
Yeah.
If you're straining, you're just holding a weight, and you're not moving. It's not really giving you any benefit because your muscle's not shortening, it's not lengthening. You're not training it to be any faster. Blah blah blah. And so everything at that point was a lot of it was about concentric. And here, you guys out there, you may or may not know, concentric is considered when you're moving. Is it against gravity? You're fighting
Yeah.
against gravity, basically. So
Yep.
if you're doing a squat and you're pushing up, to lift a weight, that would be against gravity. If you're doing a curl, you're holding your arms down and the weight's hanging below you, and you curl your arms up, you're fighting gravity. Now, if I hold my arms up and I let the weight drop, then my muscles are moving the other way. And so that's a different type of contraction we would call. Is it eccentric when I'm resisting?
Yes.
Or
The muscle's
right?
lengthening.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's active shortening, active lengthening. And then the isometric is the one where it's technically, I guess it's active, not
It just
doing
has,
anything.
yeah, it's just holding the tension,
ISO means same length, right? So same tension,
Exactly.
but no length. So
Yep.
again, Aaron mentioned that he had done some stuff in his training that I'll just let you explain it. The stuff that come up about isometric, which I found really fascinating.
Yeah. So like you said, you want to talk about the three phases of movement. It doesn't matter what you're doing. These three phases of movement are always there. There's always like you just mentioned, the eccentric lowering. There is your transition phase, which is the isometric phase, the transition between lowering and lifting, whatever you want to call it, and then your concentric phase. Now, when you break these three apart and you train them in individual phases, you get really reactive in each phase, I guess is what you could say. But yeah, I use a lot of analogies. So let's say you have a spring that's really loose, and it's a loose old spring. So when you go to compress that spring, it doesn't absorb force very well. It just kind of collapses, right?
Right.
So the main focus of the eccentric phase is teaching your body how to absorb that force, store that force, and then be able to turn it around and be explosive.
Right.
So our muscles are the same way, like that spring. So if you ever, like I told you, I could just watch somebody do like a depth jump, maybe just jump off of a stool or land from a normal jump, and I'm going to be able to tell how explosive they are, because if they can't land softly and smoothly and absorb, that means that they're not going to be able to turn around, store and absorb that force and create it.
Right.
If you can't store the force, you can't create it. Right.
Right.
So that's where the eccentric comes into play. Now, the isometric phase is you want to have an efficient and effective transition between those two phases. So like if you bounce a bouncy ball off of cement, it has a very clean transition because it has that sticking point. Right. Any jumper, you'll know that sticking point is about a quarter squat or so. You don't go to a 90-degree squat to jump. You hit that quarter squat sticking point. And then the elite jumpers, you'll notice whether you watch it in slow-mo, you watch it in person, that sticking point is so concrete and fast, they don't waste any energy.
Right.
Now, if you, let's say you were watching more of a novice jumper, you'll see that when they go, there's not like a clean, it's not like a clean change of direction. It's like a slowly absorbing and then changing direction. Right. So that's where training the isometric phase comes in.
Okay.
And then obviously you have the concentric, the lifting phase, where you're just being all out reactive. It's really like thing in life. If you want to be a better sprinter, you don't just run sprints. What do? You break down the mechanics. You do your A skips, you do your B skips, you work on your knee drive, you work on your cycling. So by the time you bring all of those facets back together, now you have a more well-oiled machine. So it's the same thing with movement, really.
Wow. So how do you separate those? I mean, if you're talking about doing each phase individually, would that mean that I just basically just work an eccentric squat in a workout?
Yeah.
Like pick something up and just resist, and then stop and get out of it? Or do I go ahead and work the isometric at that point, hold it, and then, I mean, it seems like you'd run out of energy trying to do all three at the same time. So
yeah, so that's the thing. You wouldn't do them all three at the same time. You would break them up. Now, this is where it's going to get into individualized in your programming. But let's say typically you'll have a 12-week program. Okay. Mm-hmm. The first 4 weeks, the focus is going to be on eccentric. So we're just going to take a back squat and use it as an example for all three phases. Right. So your eccentric phase, your first 4 weeks, you're going to be focusing on, the time spent lowering.
Right.
Okay. Now, typically, as you increase the sets throughout that 4 weeks, okay. So let's say week 1, you're doing 5 sets of 4 reps per se. Okay. And then let's say you're going to take 4 seconds to lower on every single rep. When you get to the bottom, you're going to hit it and explode up. Okay. As you progress through that 4-week phase, so the next week, we're going to decrease the amount of reps you do, but we're going to increase the amount of time spent lowering. So now let's say we're doing 5 sets, but of only 3 reps. And now instead of 4 seconds lowering, we're doing 5 seconds lowering on each rep. Okay. So you see, we're kind of like hitting this peak. Now let's go one more with it. The next week we go 6 sets of 2 reps. Okay. But you're taking 6 seconds to lower on each rep. Okay. Okay. And then the 4th week is always a deload week where you go back to no tempo. Okay. And you're just maybe hitting 5 sets of 5, 50%, just getting your central nervous system to, because you wouldn't want to hit only eccentrics for 12 weeks because it would kind of slow your body down. Right. Okay. So you're going to transition are you saying the 4th week is a transition between the eccentric and the next? The 4th week, we'll just call it a reactive phase where there's no tempo. So you're just doing like a lighter weight and you're moving it as fast as you can, getting to 90, coming back up, getting to 90, coming back up. Okay. So let's take that same set and rep scheme and apply it to isometric. So now you had your deload week, your 4th week, you're feeling fresh, you're moving into your isometric week. Okay. The isometric week is very, very taxing on your central nervous system because it takes a lot of focus and you got to hold these bottom positions. So, So now let's say we're back to 5 sets of 4 and we're doing a 4-second hold at 90 degrees of the squat. So now you're not going to do an eccentric to lower into that isometric. You're going to drop right to the bottom. Right. Okay. So you're not loading yourself up with a ton of weight here, maybe 80% or so of your max. Okay. Okay. Right. So boom, 5 sets of 4, you drop into your reps, you hold for 4 seconds, and then you don't bob your butt to come up. You just, from that 90 degrees, you explode up. Right. Okay. Now moving into week 2, and now we're going to do a longer isometric hold with less reps. Week 3, 6 sets of 2, but now you hold the bottom of a squat for 6 seconds and exploding up. Okay. So by the time you do that, you're going to start to notice, that's when you really start to notice the changes is in the isometric phase because nobody ever focuses on it. Yeah. And it's the transition. It's the sticking point. So now you're in your isometric and also you want to pair these lifts with an explosive plyometric. So that way as soon as you do the isometric phase, maybe you hit some, you name it, whatever plyometric you want. So that way your central nervous system is pairing it and it's putting it together. Like, okay, I just practiced the sticking point. Now let me apply it to my sticking point in my plyos. Okay. That's where it gets individualized and customized, but that's the main concept of it. And then obviously your last 4 weeks is going to be where you're trying to peak. So you're moving that weight as efficiently and as fast as possible. Drop to 90, come out of it. Right. Right. Okay. So that would be quote unquote the more traditional. The last phase is something we all be more familiar with. Right. Yeah. Just doing regular, not really put explosive squats, but you're not emphasizing either the eccentric or the isometric. And it sounds to me like those are the missing parts of the training. Cause I remember
you know, we were told to take it down a little bit slow, but not horribly slowly, you know. And I remember learning later from a guy that once I'd gotten out of UCLA who was a proponent of really slow reps, you know. And he had told me that, you know, like if you do a bench press and you've got like say 200 pounds and you push it up really fast, like if you're strong enough to explode it, he goes, most of the work was done here because the weight is already coasting now. Like once you give it that huge jolt, it's already moving. So out at the farther ranges, you're not having to work as much. And he said that it takes a lot more strength to take that weight and move it slower all the way through that range of motion. And I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense to me, you know. And that's a slower moving concentric phase. Whereas, you know, another part that was usually skipped, you know, and they taught us this early at UCLA in kinesiology, was most people, you know, because you watching some of the old, I remember friends doing this in high school, you know, when they were trying to max, they would drop the weight and almost bounce it off their chest, like bam, like this.
Yeah.
Like, well, that doesn't take any strength, and you can crack your ribs or your sternum, right? So
that too,
like,
yeah.
You know, a slow down, touch, and then bring it back up. You know, they said, well, you need to work, and I've trained this way forever with my kids. I'm like, hey, we need to work in both directions. So don't just let the weight drop. You know, control it, explode it back up. But we're adding here in this, it sounds to me like an even higher emphasis on the eccentric, you know, like you said, stretching the drop time basically from 4 to 5 to 6 seconds. And then even more so the turnaround. I find that so interesting that the isometric is the part. And you told me that. You said that the isometric was where you made your most gains, both in your vertical and your 40 time on both. Do you think was it directly measurable?
The vertical for sure. You know, who knows if it was, you know, I'd like to think all three contributed, but as a jumper, I just know I've always been cognizant of that sticking point. So when and you can even do isometrics just to your sticking point. Like you could just work on being in a squat rack, drop into a quarter squat, and being very specific with what range of motion you drop to, even that.
Right.
But yeah, I think, like you said, the eccentric and the isometric are the most skipped in training, and especially, you know, back in the day, like it wasn't even a thing.
Right.
So it just makes sense that you would increase your capacity to store energy.
Right.
Just like a rubber band, it needs to store the energy to be able to snap it out. So our muscles, similar to that. But sorry, I just had a quick point on the lifting slow on the lifting phase. I don't necessarily believe in that, because then you're kind of teaching your central nervous system bad habits, right? Depending on what you're doing. Now, you wouldn't want to come out of a squat at a snail's speed, because then your central nervous system is remembering that and saying, okay, well, now when I go to jump, I'm going to come up slow instead of, boom, hitting it coming up. But
that's important.
Bodybuilders train that way because of time under tension. They just want their muscles to be under tension and get swole, get big.
Right. I understand what you're saying. And it's an important distinction, because, you know, what we're talking about here, this sticking point in the jump. And I often explain it to my kids when we're jumping, doing any kind of plyometrics. I said, hey, get off the ground. Like when you load up, you know, if you're doing this part where you're like here, a lot of them will be like this. They'll just go about that speed. You know, and I'm like,
yes,
hey, you should be like this. You should blur going down. I go, because the faster you stretch that muscle, the more energy is stored in it that you can release. But I said, and you got to go. Like when you do the fast load, you got to turn around and go, because if you load fast and hesitate, it's lost. You get diminishing return, you know, the longer that you wait. So I teach them leaking. Right.
Yeah.
So I like that, because you brought up the point about linking it to the plyometrics, which, you know, I was always taught too, that the plyometrics is the link between the weight room and actual performance, right? That's why they got so popular, because, you know, lifting weights, squatting is not like jumping. It's just squatting and making your legs stronger, you know, but it is and it isn't. But, you know, when we're doing it, we've got so much more to talk about in these subjects. We have to do this again. I've been trying to get more information on doing, starting with 2 legs and moving to single leg lifts. I'm starting to see a lot more one-legged deadlifts, RDLs, LDLs, even one-legged squats, the Bulgarian pistol squats, right? And I'm looking at that stuff going, well, that's more specific in a lot of ways. Now, if I'm a volleyball player and I'm going to jump up off 2 legs, then, squats and cleans and all those are still desirable to do a lot more probably off 2 legs, unless you got a middle setter guy that can run and jump off 1. You see that every once in a while now. Basketball, some guys dunk better off 2, some off 1. The high jump's very specific, high, long, and triple. You have to jump off 1 leg, right? So that is just, there's so many things to talk about. Well,
there is. There really is.
Aaron, I'm gonna let you go, because if I keep going, I'll end up getting divorced, and just too much time spent. But I would love to do this again, dude. There's so much here. This training that you're doing, I love the fact that you are, reading anything and everything, applying. Next time, remind me, I want to talk about the knees over toes guy. I don't know if you've been seeing his stuff. I find that really, really interesting. I have a trainer that I work with who's a, doctor of chiropractic, which a lot of people become leery of right away, but he's got a sports medicine, background, and he's just does not like, the full range of motion and all that stuff. And he's like, yeah, well, let me see this guy in 10 years, and, I know he's only 28 now and this and that. And I'm like, okay, but the story is amazing. And I watch his stuff. He's been real aggressive, and, there's all kinds of things in there. And I've already stolen quite a few things, from it. I'm sure you've taken a few things out of that as well. So
I have.
That's something we can go over with a finer tooth comb.
Yeah. I would love to. I could spend the whole time talking about the training and the specifics of that.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can do that one time too. We kind of got both of our own stories in there. I think we got a little bit of yours and more of yours and mine, but I'd much rather have this podcast, which I'm going to ask you to think of a name. I already have a name for my podcast. The Sky High and Fly Jumps camps was just like a quick, I was going to start this training business, and you need a fictitious business name. Like, and it popped into my head, and, okay. But I'm thinking, something snappy, something catchy. As Tom Hanks.
I don't know. I like the Sky High and Fly. I think it, yeah. Because right. It kind of encompasses everything you're wanting to do, man. And it's it's got a good rhyme to it.
Well, I appreciate that. On the shameless plug front, just in case I can get this out, I don't think it's going to happen this fast, but we'll have to post date it. But got the Arcadia Invitational coming up this week. It's one of the biggest meets that they have in California. It was shut down last year because of the pandemic, and of course, so was everything last year. This year, they closed down our state meet already, but they're going to give us CIF finals. And then this is actually one of the few invitationals that's going to go off, and it's a big show. Takes some decent marks to get there, and I'm proud to have 7 athletes that I've trained that are going to be there this week. 7 different high jumpers, and
nice.
From all over, which is great. And these kids are hardworking and amazing. And unfortunately, I don't know if anybody's gonna be able to see it because they're still not letting anybody in. Some of the coaches may get in. I think I've got one pass where I can see one of my kids in the morning at 10:30, and then everybody else, they all go to different schools. So it's like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able, get to coach them. But anyway, that's the shameless plug side. Aaron, there's so many more things I want to talk about. So we'll definitely do this again if you're interested in doing so. And
absolutely, man.
We'll find a way to keep those other things in mind. I want to talk, how to produce these great athletes. I think, it's your approach and mine. One of the reasons why I think we get along is we both did the same things in a lot of ways, the experimenting on ourselves. You were mentioning some other things. I'm sure you're talking about doing doubling up your workouts. I keep trying to teach my kids to get into ice baths. You're talking about, icing your knees. And, I didn't learn about ice baths for recovery until I was out of college. And I wished I'd have known it when I was in high school, for the 2-day state meet. That would have been wonderful, because I would gladly go back in the time machine and sit in a tub full of ice. Because the night I jumped 6'8" at the state finals the first night, and I came back the next day and I had nothing. I could not get off the ground. I was too heavy. I was a power guy. So the first night I was good. And the second night, all those skinny guys they were unaffected by the first night, and I was just done. So I would love to go back and recreate time. All right, sir. Hey, it's getting late your time out there. I appreciate for those of you again on this first Sky High and Fly podcast. I was talking with Aaron. Say your last name again. I'm going to screw it up. Wascha, not wax on. I keep wanting to say wax on and wax off because of your site. Aaron Wascha, he's playing football right now. Are you signed up and ready to go again this next season? Do they have you ready to come back?
Yeah, I have this workout coming up. So the AFL, actually, that's another story, but it folded after the 2019 season, but that was even before COVID. But yeah, so I was done with the league anyway. Like I said, it was a stepping stone. I knew I can't stay too long in this league, so it's NFL or CFL this year. I've got that workout coming up, and
now who's going to be at that workout? Is that a workout just for like all kinds of people like yourself that scouts can come look at?
Yeah. It's run by basically a company that's contracted by the NFL, or they have an affiliation. So there'll be some NFL scouts there. There's not going to be like one from every team, but
right.
I gotta go and I gotta show out. So I got to put up numbers, and
so you've been training.
That's what I trained for.
You're pretty sharp right now. What's your 40 time down to?
I would say my 40 is just right under a 4.5. So maybe a high, maybe a 4.48 around there. I'm hoping if you can crack the 4.4s, you open up some eyes. So I've done it before. Just got to do it again. And then obviously my broad jump, my vertical leap, that'll all be where it needs to be. So,
do they do any weight training stuff with you guys too? Do you still do, I know the linemen do the 200-pound bench, repeats and all that. Do they do anything like that with you guys?
No, not really, because they're like this company, they're traveling around. So they're not taking the equipment with them. They just take the bare basics. But obviously your NFL, it's not like the combine. They're still doing that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, Aaron, when that's coming up in May, we want to check back in.
May 22nd.
May 22nd. And that's where are they holding that?
It's in Houston. I don't know. They haven't released the actual stadium yet, but they typically just find a nice high school stadium with turf and they do it there. Yeah.
All right. Well, man, I want to make a trip out to Houston and watch you. We'll definitely talk either again before that or right after it and see how everything went. And maybe we should get somebody shooting some video of you or something.
Sounds good, man. Yeah, I'm gonna try. I think it'll be recorded, so I should be able to get that footage.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, I'm your biggest fan officially, and want to hear back. So I appreciate your time. Your willingness to share your training secrets, all these things that are part of the big thing. I know we talked about your 12-week training cycles and all that. These are things that Aaron, is part of his business, that he does online. So more shameless plugs, and we'll do some more of those in the future. All right, Aaron, I really appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon, man. Thanks for the call.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on, Troy. It was an honor, man.
Hey, anytime. All right, bud. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good night.
All right. You too. Bye.
All right. Bye.